The Louisiana heat pressed down like a wet blanket, thick with the scent of swamp rot and gasoline. Waves of humidity rippled over the cracked highway, warping the view ahead. I wiped sweat from my brow, adjusting the camera strap around my neck, squinting into the distance. No sign of the fox. No sign of anything. I should have been writing a real story, something that actually mattered. But instead, I was here, stranded in the middle of nowhere, chasing a ghost of a legend. The locals swore they'd seen it, an albino marsh fox. Some called it an omen. Some swore it wasn't an animal at all. And here I was, hoping a photo of a white fox would go viral. How pathetic. I was a small-town journalist. I wrote about county fairs, the mayor's latest PR stunt, and the occasional missing dog. No real investigative work. No breaking stories. Just page fillers. If I had the money, I'd already be in New Orleans chasing real stories. Stories that mattered. But I wasn't just stuck here. My mother had been slipping away for the last 7 years. I was the only one left to take care of her. My half-brother was gone, buried under 6 feet of dirt after he took his own life in 2019. He never recovered after his 5-year-old son, Jackson, died. Rare blood disorder, the doctors said. A genetic anomaly. I called it a goddamn nightmare. Rent was due next week. My savings were a joke. If I didn't land something soon, anything, I was screwed. Would a viral photo of a ghostly white fox change my life? No, but it might buy me a little more time. Then I saw her. A lone figure staggered down the center of the road. No car, no supplies, just a slow, dragging gait. The nearest town was 20 miles away. She shouldn't have been here. At first, I thought she was a mirage, a trick of the heat and swamp mist. But as she neared, I got a clearer look. She was old, 70s, maybe older. Her clothes were caked in dust and sweat. Her arms were thin, sinewy. Her skin was burnt and peeling, like parchment left too long in the sun. Her hair clung to her forehead, dark with sweat. And something about her felt wrong. My eyes caught on a faded panda tattoo on her arm. Amateur work. The lines were shaky, uneven. I grabbed my canteen and jogged toward her, holding it out. "Ma'am? Here, take this. You need water." She didn't flinch. Her eyes never met mine. She stared past me, through me, like I wasn't even there. "Ma'am?" No reaction. And then, she smiled. Her breathing was wrong. A wet, rattling sound, thick, like something rotting inside her chest. My stomach tightened. I reached out, placing a careful hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am? Seriously, let me take you to a hospital. Or at least, let me get you back home." Then, she stopped. Not gradually, not naturally. She just froze, like a broken puppet, her body stiff and unnaturally still. The silence stretched. Her chest rose and fell in ragged, labored breaths, her skin slick with sweat and dust. Then, slowly, her head turned toward me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and my stomach dropped. They weren't just tired. They were empty, wide, stretched in confusion, in fear, like she was just realizing she was here. And then, she whispered it. "The kids." A cold, skeletal chill scraped down my spine. "There are no kids." Her voice barely made it past her lips, like she was afraid to say it. Her gaze flickered, wildly searching the swamps, as if she expected to see them, as if she was realizing too late what was missing. I swallowed hard. "What kids?" "I don't." Her body jerked forward, like something inside her had snapped. Her fingers latched onto my wrist, claw-like, digging into my skin. "Where's my baby?" Her voice cracked. Her legs trembled. Her breathing hitched, ragged and uneven, like a fish gasping for air. The kids, they're gone. All of them. She convulsed, chest rising and falling too fast, her grip tightening until my skin burned. Then her voice dropped to a whisper, a sound so quiet it made the hair on my neck stand. Ashbrook, she wheezed. There are no kids in Ashbrook. All of them gone. Then she collapsed. I caught her just in time. Her body was shaking. Her breath was shallow. Something inside her was breaking. I didn't know what the hell was happening, but I knew one thing. I had to get her help. I had never stepped foot there. It was 30 miles down this empty road. A place that, until now, meant nothing to me. Now, felt like a warning. I drove fast. The swamp trees blurred past. The sky darkened. And then, a rundown sign finally caught my attention. Welcome to Ashbrook. The hospital wasn't hard to find. There was only one building that even looked like it could be one. I whipped the Jeep into the empty parking lot, slammed it into park, bolted for the front door. Hello? Someone help. Please. Then, a man in a white coat rushed past me. Didn't even look at me, just kept going, pushing a wheelchair toward my Jeep. The dark-haired doctor moved with urgency, but his face, it was expressionless, like this was just another night, like he'd done this before. He stopped by the car, didn't ask any questions, didn't ask where I found her, didn't ask what happened, just silence. I hesitated. Do you know her? The doctor still didn't look up. We all know Marley. His voice was stiff, like he wasn't supposed to say more. Inside, the hospital felt wrong. The hospital wasn't normal. It wasn't the usual sterile, overlit nightmare. The walls were a sickly beige, the air thick with the smell of old antiseptic and something stale. The waiting room was nearly silent. A single nurse sat behind the counter, barely acknowledging me. The place felt empty. Too empty. No kids. No families. Just a handful of elderly patients, staring at the walls like they were waiting for something. Waiting for what? I didn't know, and I didn't want to. I sat in the lobby for an hour before a nurse finally approached me. Her smile felt forced. She'll be fine, she said. Her voice was too calm, too rehearsed. You can leave now. Can I see her? The nurse hesitated. Then, too quickly, she shook her head. She's resting. I could hear it in her voice. Something about her delivery. Something about the way she said it. Like she was reciting a line. Like she'd said it before. I stepped outside, and the Louisiana heat slammed into me like a wall. I needed air. I needed space. But most of all, I needed to get the hell away from that hospital. Something about the place. The way they treated Marley like an afterthought. The way the nurse brushed me off. Felt wrong. I leaned against the Jeep, rubbing my temples. I could just leave. Drive home. Pretend none of this ever happened. But the words wouldn't leave me. There are no kids in Ashbrook. She was afraid. And now that I was here, standing in the heat of this town, I couldn't shake the feeling. She wasn't wrong. I scanned the street ahead. Ashbrook was small, too quiet. A handful of businesses lined the road. Nothing modern, nothing corporate. Just mom-and-pop shops that looked like they hadn't been updated in decades. A thrift store, a butcher shop, a place called Ashbrook Treasures with sun-faded knickknacks in the window. It wasn't what I expected. For a town with no children, no young families, Ashbrook was alive. People milled about, moving between shops, chatting outside the diner. Like the town was perfectly content in its own isolated world. Like it had nothing to hide. Like it had never lost anything at all. I reached into the passenger seat, grabbed my camera, my notebook. If there were no kids here, someone had to notice. Someone had to care. The first shop I spotted was an arts and crafts store. Run down but still open. I figured it was a good place to start. Easing into things. Chatting up the owner. Feeling out the people before pushing too hard. I pulled open the door. The brass bell overhead jingled. A scent of dried wood, old paper, and something vaguely floral filled the air. Shelves lined the walls. Hand-woven baskets. Carved figurines. Hand-painted signs with phrases like, "Bless this home," and "Welcome, friends," felt too normal. No cashier. The place was open, but empty. I hesitated. "Hello? Are you open?" A few seconds passed before a woman emerged from the back. She was older, maybe in her 50s, wearing a tie-dye shirt and pink shorts. She smiled easily, her movements quick and eager, like someone who wasn't used to getting many customers. "Well, howdy there. Not very often we get an outsider. Look around, everything's negotiable. Let me know if you need any help at all." Her energy was a stark contrast to the cold, distant reception I got at the hospital. I returned her smile, slipping into journalist mode. If I wanted answers, I needed to blend in. Be friendly, be honest, be curious but not suspicious. I ran my fingers over a small, hand-carved wooden owl on the counter. "Actually, I'm a journalist. I wanted to talk to some locals. See if they had any interesting stories to share about life in Ashbrook." Her eyes flickered upward, as if considering something. "Well, there's not much that goes on in this town," she said finally. "Sometimes we get some drunkards making fools of themselves. But that's about as exciting as it gets around here." I let out a short laugh. I decided to shift gears. I came to town because an elderly woman collapsed in front of me about 30 miles out from Ashbrook. I hope she's okay. Do you happen to know her? She was about my height, a bit thinner. Had a panda tattoo on her arm. The shift in her expression was immediate. A flicker of something. Concern? Fear? Recognition? Then, just as quickly, she covered it. A quick, practiced smile. "Marley? Oh dear Lord, that poor woman." She wrung her hands together, forcing a tight-lipped smile. "She's been having a rough go of it lately." Something about the way she said it made my stomach knot. "What do you mean?" I asked. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the front door, like she was checking for someone. "She's just not well." The same vague response I got at the hospital. The same rehearsed answer. She said something strange before she passed out. I pressed forward, kept talking about kids. Said there were no kids in Ashbrook. The shopkeeper's smile faltered. Just a flicker, a slight tightening of her lips, a twitch of her fingers against the counter. "She's confused," she said. "Too quickly. Been saying strange things for a while now." I pretended to scribble something in my notebook. Then casually, "So what exactly happened to those kids again?" I tapped my pen against the paper. "Why'd they leave?" "I forget. I was bluffing." I had nothing but a half-muttered warning from an exhausted, terrified woman. But I needed to see how she'd react. Her hands stilled against the countertop. Then quietly, she said, "They never left. Just gotta pass their trials." The words left her lips softly, like a reflex, like something she'd said 1,000 times before. My stomach twisted. "What trials?" Her eyes snapped up, like she just realized what she said. She forced another smile. "Oh, just an old saying. Anyway, like I said, pick anything you like. 40% discount for the outsider." She turned, grabbing something from a nearby shelf, a handmade doll. It was disturbingly realistic. The fingers too small, the glass eyes too bright. A gift, the shopkeeper had said. "My son made this one a long time ago," she said. "But I'd like you to have it." I turned it from side to side. bouncing its limbs as if I was appreciating the craftsmanship. Something dark and thick seeped from the collar of its tiny shirt. Some kind of black sludge. Smelled awful, like damp earth and copper, like it had been left outside too long. I crinkled my nose, wiping the grime off with my shirt sleeve. The unease curled deeper in my stomach. Still, I shoved the doll into my bag. Don't overthink it. As I zipped it shut, I heard something that made me pause. Across the street, 3 men stood outside a small building. A courthouse? Town hall? The kind of place that runs things quietly. They spoke in low, hushed voices, heads close together. I waved goodbye to the shopkeeper, but I wasn't leaving. I was going to get closer. I slowed my pace, pretended to check my camera settings. I passed by just in time to hear, "We'll take M down tonight." A pause. Then another voice. "You sure they're ready?" Council already approved it. "We go down after dark." A sharp silence followed. I looked up. They were staring at me. All 3 of them. My pulse kicked up. I forced a casual smile, tapping my camera. "Cool old building," I said, gesturing toward the town hall. History buffs love this stuff. They didn't respond, just kept watching. The moment stretched too long, like they were waiting, like they were trying to see if I'd keep talking. Cleared my throat, turned, walked away, but I wasn't leaving. Not yet. I needed a break, just for a moment, something to ground me. The neon glow of a diner sign flickered ahead. Ashbrook Diner. Simple, welcoming. Inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule. Checkered floors. The faint sound of an old radio crackling in the corner. A handful of locals sat at the counter, their conversations quiet. A waitress approached, middle-aged, kind smile. Too kind. "What can I get ya?" I wasn't in the mood for anything extravagant. Just a burger and fries. Medium well. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she smiled again. Coming right up, the burger arrived fast. Too fast. Like they'd known I was coming. Like they'd had it ready before I even walked in. The smell was intoxicating. Rich, perfectly seasoned. Almost unreal. I took a bite. And another. And another. It was delicious. Better than any burger I'd ever had. The juices melted in my mouth. The meat was soft. By the time I realized it, I had devoured half of it. I hadn't even noticed swallowing the first bite. I finished my meal, thanked the waitress, and left. I felt full. Nightfall. Hours passed. The moon hung full and heavy in the sky. Not a single cloud in sight. A perfect silver glow draped over Ashbrook. It should have been beautiful, but something felt wrong. The town was silent. The kind of silence that listens, that watches, that waits. I stood across the street, partially hidden behind an old newspaper dispenser, watching. The town hall loomed before me, but I knew better. Something was off. I had seen the men earlier, watched them disappear behind the building, heard their hushed words playing again in my head. "We'll take M down tonight." I checked my surroundings. The streets were empty. No late-night wanderers. No passing cars. Even the diner, which had been warm and buzzing just hours ago. Now it was dark. I moved quickly, crossed the street with light steps. My heart pounded against my ribs. I reached the side entrance, a set of thick wooden doors, latched shut with a heavy padlock. Not the way in. I slipped around back, and there they were, large cellar doors, slightly ajar. I took a slow breath, steadying my nerves. Then I pulled the doors open. The hinges whined softly, echoing into the still night. A staircase spiraled downward, swallowed in darkness. The air changed immediately, thick with the scent of damp earth, and something rotten. I hesitated, I should leave. Every part of me screamed to turn back. But I didn't. I pulled out my phone's flashlight, clicked it on, and stepped inside. The doors creaked shut behind me. The stone walls dripped with moisture as I crept deeper. The staircase ended in a low-ceilinged corridor. The air was thick and still. Dim, flickering lights lined the walls, casting the space in a sickly yellow glow. Then I heard it. Something moved. A low mechanical groan, like something large shifting, creaking its way toward the surface. I pressed forward, heart in my throat. The hallway opened up into an enormous cavern. And what I saw, I would never have imagined, not even in my worst nightmares. It was like some kind of twisted underground factory. Dozens of sickly, gray-skinned children worked in eerie silence. Their small, frail bodies covered in grime. Their fingers raw and blackened. Their faces hollow. They looked like corpses. Some worked at old, rusted machines. Their hands moved mechanically, like they had done this forever, like they had no choice. They weren't making tools, not ones made from steel or wood. They were molding filth, thick, black sludge, the kind you'd find rotting at the bottom of a swamp, the kind that clings to your skin. Some children pressed the filth into molds, packaged it, wrapped it, stacked it into containers identical to the ones I had seen in the town's shop windows. Then I saw the food. Children worked at long wooden tables, combining different piles of filth to form meals. A sandwich dripping with putrid slime. A container of French fries coated in black sludge. Some maggot-infested paste being shaped into the form of eggs, placed gently into a carton. My stomach lurched. I choked back the bile rising in my throat. Above me, an industrial lift groaned. Crates of filth were loaded onto the platform. Through the gap in the ceiling, I saw them, the townspeople, waiting above, receiving the crates, stacking them into storage. Food, tools, clothing, all crafted from filth, all made by the children of filth. Everything Ashbrook needed. I saw a table in the storage room. 3 different stacks of soda cans. The first stack was fully black, dripping goo, freshly made. The middle stack was still covered in grime, but letters were forming. The third stack looked like regular Pepsi, like something you'd buy at the store. My stomach turned. My mind couldn't keep up. Then, a heavy slam echoed through the cavern. I ducked behind a crate, heart racing. The councilman entered, dragging a small body bag toward a slab of concrete. Something moved inside the bag. A soft, muffled whimper. They unzipped it slowly. A young boy, his limbs frail, his face half hidden in shadows. 5 or 6 years old, still alive. I pressed my back harder against the crate, breath shallow. The councilmen were talking. Their voices echoed, bouncing off the walls. He should be fine through the first phase, right? Maybe. They all get sick. It's just the way Ashbrook is. A sharp silence, then a sigh. If he survives the trials, we'll send him back up. If not, he can join the rest of them. A realization hit me like ice water down my spine. Every child in Ashbrook got sick. Not just the ones down here. All of them. The only way to survive was through this, through the trials, through whatever horrors they put them through. If they made it to adulthood, they could return, live among the townspeople, like nothing ever happened. But if they failed, they stayed here, trapped in some limbo between life and death. Made to work, made to create. I squeezed my eyes shut. I needed to wake up. This wasn't real. This was hell. Then, I saw him, a small boy, working at one of the stations. His tiny fingers pressing filth into a small box branded with an Ashbrook logo. His skin gray, his face hollow, his wounds open and oozing. Pus leaked from his eyes, ears, and mouth. My throat closed, my vision blurred. Jackson, my nephew. That's impossible. Jackson was dead. I had been to his funeral. I had seen his body. Yet, he was here, frozen in time, still 5 years old. His eyes met mine, wide, recognizing. Jackson, I whispered. His breath hitched. For a moment, a flicker of something human returned to his face. Then, like something inside him snapped, he looked away, kept working, like he wasn't allowed to acknowledge me. Before I could process any of it, the councilmen's voices returned. They dragged another body forward. Not in a bag this time. I saw her face. Marley. She was dead, but wrong. Her skin sagged, splitting at the seams. Her panda tattoo hardly recognizable. Vile liquids oozed from her mouth and eyes. Her body twitched, like it was pretending to be alive. The children turned. Their eyes locked onto her. They smiled. They moved. I watched as they tore into her flesh, their small hands reaching, grabbing, ripping, eating. A high, sharp scream ripped through the air. I didn't realize it came from me. I ran. I grabbed Jackson. Come on. We're leaving. For a moment he followed. Then he shuddered. His skin melted. His arms dissolved in my hands. He met my gaze one last time. His eyes, full of sorrow, understanding. Then he was gone. I stumbled to my Jeep. I drove. I didn't look back. But now, I feel it. Inside me, the burger. The perfectly seasoned burger. I ate Filth. If you're reading this, please, do not go to Ashbrook.